There are moments, usually late at night, when you sit quietly and realize something strange. You don't miss your old life. You don't miss being busy. You don't miss the pressure. You don't even miss who you used to be. And yet, the quiet still hurts. It's confusing to feel lonely for something you don't want back. This kind of loneliness doesn't come from loss. It comes after change, after you've outgrown certain roles, after life slowed down, after people stopped needing you the way they once did. You're still capable, still thoughtful, still very much here. But fewer people ask how you're doing, and even fewer wait for the real answer. So you don't bring it up. You tell yourself, this is just how life is now. And maybe that's why this loneliness feels so hard to explain. Because nothing is wrong, but something is quietly missing. And you don't know what to call it yet. Why this loneliness feels so unsettling. What makes this loneliness unsettling is that, on the surface, life seems fine. Nothing is falling apart. There is no crisis to point to, no obvious reason to complain, and that almost makes it worse. It's harder to explain pain when you don't have a clear reason for it. You may even question yourself. Why do I feel this way? Shouldn't I be grateful now? Did I do something wrong? During the day, you manage well. You stay occupied. You keep moving. But in quieter moments, when the phone stays still, when there's no one asking anything of you, the feeling returns. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft weight in your chest that says, something inside me hasn't been met yet. And because there's no clear story for it, you carry it alone. Not wanting to worry anyone, not knowing how to explain a loneliness that arrived after things finally slowed down. You don't miss the life. You miss the feeling. Here's the part that's hard to admit. You don't actually miss your old life. You don't miss the stress, the constant responsibility, the feeling of always being needed. What you miss isn't the life. It's how alive you felt inside it. Back then, your days had weight. People depended on you. Your presence mattered in visible ways. Now, the days are lighter, quieter. And with that quiet, you notice something you didn't have time to notice before. A lack of urgency, a lack of direction, a feeling that nothing is really pulling you forward. It's not regret, and it's not longing to go back. It's the strange emptiness that appears when the noise fades and you're left alone with yourself. You don't miss being exhausted, you miss feeling necessary. And that realization can be painful, because you don't know what replaces that feeling yet. When you're no longer defined by roles, for a long time your life had clear outlines. You were needed for something, by someone, in ways that shaped your days. Provider, caregiver, the reliable one. When roles fade, it can feel like part of you went quiet with them. Those roles didn't just fill your time. They gave you direction. They told you where to go, what mattered, and who you were in the world. Now, many of them are lighter or gone, and while that brings relief, it also leaves space. Space that feels unfamiliar. You're not lost, but you're not being pulled forward either. So you float a little, not in crisis, not in chaos, just slightly unanchored. And that can feel lonely, not because you don't have a life, but because you're still learning who you are, without the roles that once defined you. Why going back doesn't feel right. Sometimes people say things like, why not just go back to how it was? And you nod politely, but inside, you know that's not the answer. Going back would mean pretending you didn't change. Your old life required a version of you that no longer exists. Someone who said yes more often than they should have. Someone who stayed busy to avoid feeling. You've grown more selective now, more honest about your limits. So even when loneliness appears, going back doesn't feel comforting. It feels wrong. Not because the past was bad, but because you're not that person anymore. This loneliness isn't pulling you backward. It's standing in front of you, quietly asking, if you're not going back, what are you moving toward now? And you don't have the answer yet, but you know one thing for sure. Shrinking yourself again is not it. The space between who you were and who you're becoming. Right now, you may feel like you're standing in between. Not who you used to be, but not quite sure who you are becoming either. Nothing is clearly wrong, but nothing feels fully settled. Being in between can feel lonelier than being lost. Your days have fewer demands now, fewer people pulling at you, more quiet than you expected. And in that quiet, you notice yourself thinking more, wondering more, asking questions that don't have quick answers. What matters to me now? What still feels worth my energy? Who am I when no one needs me to be anything? This space isn't failure. It's a pause you never had permission to take before. But pauses can feel uncomfortable when you spent your life moving, fixing, providing. So the loneliness shows up here, not because something ended badly, but because something new hasn't taken shape yet. And waiting, without direction, can feel heavier than most people realize. Why this feeling is so hard to talk about. Part of what makes this loneliness heavier is that you don't know what to call it. It doesn't sound like grief, it doesn't feel like sadness, and it doesn't fit the stories people usually understand. Unnamed feelings are often the loneliest ones. So when someone asks how you're doing, you hesitate. You don't want to sound dramatic. You don't want to confuse anyone. And you don't want to explain something you barely understand yourself. So you say, I'm okay. Not because it's entirely true, but because it's easier than searching for words that don't quite exist. This feeling lives quietly, between thoughts, between moments, and because it has no clear name, you carry it alone, not wanting to burden anyone, not wanting to seem ungrateful. But just because a feeling is hard to explain doesn't mean it isn't real. It only means you haven't been given space to speak it yet. What this loneliness is trying to tell you. This loneliness isn't asking you to go back. It isn't asking you to fill your days with noise or force yourself into something new. This kind of loneliness isn't a problem. It's a message you haven't translated yet. It's pointing to something quieter, a need for depth, for conversations that don't rush, for moments where you don't have to play a role or explain who you are. Your heart is no longer satisfied with being busy. It wants to be met. And when that doesn't happen, loneliness appears, not to punish you, not to tell you something is wrong, but to let you know that you've outgrown shallow connection, that your inner life has become richer and now needs a different kind of space. At first, that awareness feels lonely, because growth always creates distance before it creates belonging. And this, right here, is that in-between moment. You are not done becoming. There's a quiet fear that sometimes appears at this stage of life. A fear you rarely say out loud. That this might be it. That whatever depth you're feeling now has nowhere to go. The fear isn't aging. It's believing your inner life is finished. You may wonder if meaningful connection belongs to the past. If growth is something you already completed. If now you're simply meant to adjust and accept. But listen closely. You are still noticing, still questioning, still feeling layers you didn't feel before. That means something important. Becoming doesn't end. It slows. It becomes quieter, less urgent, more honest. And that quiet can feel lonely when the world around you expects you to be done. But the fact that you're still searching for meaning is not a problem. It's proof that something in you is still unfolding, staying with you in the quiet. If this conversation felt familiar, let that be enough for tonight. You don't need clarity. You don't need a plan. And you don't need to make sense of everything before the day ends. Just notice what's here. The quiet. The awareness. The part of you that's still paying attention. You are not lonely because something went wrong. You're lonely because you changed. And change always creates space before it creates direction. So if tonight feels a little emptier, don't rush to fill it. Sit with it. As long as you're here, listening, breathing, staying, you don't have to be alone in it. Not in this space.